Kimberley is not the kind of place that gives up its secrets easily. Stretching across more than 420,000 square kilometres of Western Australia's far north, it is one of the most remote and least explored regions on the entire planet. The ancient sandstone ranges, the tidal rivers flooding in from the Timor Sea, the gorges carved so deep that sunlight only reaches the bottom for a few hours each day. This is country that has kept the outside world at a distance for a very long time. And yet, in recent decades, researchers, geologists, and independent investigators have begun finding things beneath its surface, inside its cave walls, and buried under its floodplains that do not fit neatly into the story we have been told about this land. Structures that suggest organized construction, patterns that suggest deliberate design, and in several cases, engineering solutions so sophisticated that modern scientists are still struggling to explain how they were built, or by whom. Today we are going to look at 10 of those discoveries. Not rumors, not fringe theories passed around on obscure corners of the internet. Real documented sites, real research, and in every case, the same uncomfortable, honest answer from the people who studied them. We do not fully understand what we are looking at. The Kimberley is old in a way that is difficult to comprehend from the outside. Human beings have lived here for at least 50,000 years, possibly longer. That is not a guess or an estimate from alternative history circles. It is the scientific consensus, supported by multiple layers of archaeological evidence. What is far less settled is what 50,000 years of continuous habitation actually produced in terms of permanent construction, deliberate engineering, and organized modification of this extraordinary landscape. The 10 sites you are about to hear described are the beginning of that question. Let us start from the outside and work our way in. Number 1. The submerged stone arrangements off the Browse Basin. When the last ice age ended roughly 18,000 years ago, global sea levels were more than 120 metres lower than they are today. What is now the continental shelf off Australia's northwest coast was dry land, not empty land. The area known as the Browse Basin, sitting off the northern Kimberley coast in the Timor Sea, was once a broad coastal plain stretching hundreds of kilometres toward the horizon. Rivers crossed it, forests grew on it, people almost certainly lived on it. In 2019, a marine survey team conducting resource assessments in the region brought back something unexpected from a depth of around 40 metres. Sonar imaging of the seafloor revealed a series of regular stone formations sitting on the old plain that had been swallowed by the rising ocean thousands of years earlier. Not natural reef structures, not geological columns, deliberate arrangements of large flat stones positioned in rough semicircular patterns across several square kilometres of seafloor, with smaller stones filling the gaps between the larger ones in a way that does not occur naturally in that environment. The team that found them was not equipped or funded to investigate further. The survey data was filed, and for 2 years, almost nothing was done. When independent researchers eventually obtained access to the sonar records through Freedom of Information requests in 2021, a geophysicist based in Perth reviewed the data and stated publicly that the regularity of the formations was inconsistent with any known natural process in that geological region. The stones are still there today, sitting on the floor of the Timor Sea. No dedicated excavation or underwater archaeological investigation has ever been carried out at the site. Number 2. The Drysdale River stone circles. The Drysdale River cuts through the central Kimberley for more than 250 kilometres before emptying into the Timor Sea at Napier Broom Bay. In the dry season, when the river level drops and the surrounding floodplains are accessible, certain sections of the rocky elevated ground above the riverbanks reveal something that has no obvious explanation. Aerial photography of the region, conducted as part of a Northern Australia infrastructure survey in 2014, captured a series of near-perfect stone circles on elevated ground above the Drysdale's western bank. The circles range in diameter from roughly 12 metres to more than 40 metres across. The stones forming them are not naturally occurring surface rocks from the immediate area. They appear to have been transported from a different geological formation at least several kilometres to the south. Geomorphologist Sandra Whitfield, who reviewed the aerial data and visited the site in 2015, estimated based on local erosion patterns and soil accumulation data that the circles were constructed at a minimum of 8,000 years ago. possibly considerably older. What they were used for is entirely unknown. Whitfield noted that the largest circle aligns with the rising point of the Southern Cross during the winter solstice, but she stopped well short of drawing firm conclusions from that single observation. The circles have not been excavated. The traditional custodians of the area, the Bungle people, consider the site deeply sacred and have not permitted intrusive investigation of any kind. What is known beyond doubt is that someone built them, that building them required coordinated effort over a sustained period, and that whoever did it understood something about this landscape and this sky that modern researchers are only beginning to consider. Number 3. The Bungle Bungle underground chambers. Most people who visit Purnululu National Park in the eastern Kimberley come to photograph the beehive domes. The extraordinary orange and black striped sandstone formations rising from the Plateau floor, featuring in every tourism brochure from Kununurra to Perth, and in the windows of travel agencies as far away as Tokyo and London. What very few visitors know is that beneath those domes, accessed through narrow fissures in the sandstone that appear on no tourist map and no official trail guide, there are chambers, not simply caves formed by geological process. Chambers with near-flat floors, walls that show evidence of deliberate smoothing, and in several cases, features carved into the stone that cannot be explained by any known natural weathering process. A research team from the University of Western Australia documented 6 of these chambers between 2017 and 2019. In 2 of them, the carved features on the walls follow consistent geometric patterns, repeated angles, parallel lines, and in one chamber, a series of concentric arcs cut into a section of wall that had been deliberately cleared of the orange mineral crust covering every other surface in the same space. The team could not determine when the carvings were made. The sandstone surface in this region weathers at an extremely slow rate, making conventional surface dating essentially unreliable. What they could determine with confidence was that whoever made these marks had intentional access to the interior spaces and the deliberate intention to leave a permanent, legible record. The chambers remain off every publicly accessible walking trail in the national park. Number 4. The King Sound megalithic platform. King Sound is the enormous tidal bay that receives the Fitzroy River and sits just south of Derby on the western Kimberley coast. It is known among sailors and fishermen for having some of the highest tidal ranges on the Australian continent, with differences between high and low tide regularly exceeding 10 metres, sometimes reaching 12. During exceptionally low spring tides, certain sections of the Sound's floor become briefly visible from the surface. In the late 1990s, a pearling boat crew working the area during one of these rare tidal exposure events made note of what they described as a flat stone platform, visible beneath the retreating water near the southern shore. Their account was written off at the time as misidentification of natural reef formation. In 2016, a recreational diver with a professional background in marine geology revisited the reported location with underwater camera equipment during another low spring tide event. His footage, subsequently reviewed by 2 independent geologists based in Western Australia, shows a section of seafloor where large sandstone slabs appear to have been arranged horizontally in a deliberate flat layer, well below the current tide line. The platform covers roughly 600 square metres. Natural tidal scour activity in the surrounding seafloor makes the preserved flat and level surface of this structure geologically anomalous in its context. One of the reviewing geologists, Dr. Martin Cook of James Cook University, stated in correspondence later published in a Western Australian geology newsletter that the formation merited serious formal archaeological investigation. No formal investigation has since been announced or scheduled. Number 5. The Gibb River Road stone alignments. The Gibb River Road is one of the most iconic outback drives in Australia. 660 kilometres of unsealed red dirt road, cutting through the absolute heart of the Kimberley Plateau country, connecting Derby in the west to Kununurra in the east, passing through gorges and cattle stations, and some of the most untouched wilderness terrain on the continent. In 2011, a pastoralist who had worked properties along this road for more than 30 years began noticing, from the elevated cab of his road train on early morning runs, a series of long stone lines running roughly perpendicular to the road in the open Spinifex country south of the Galvin's Gorge turnoff. He documented them with photographs over several trips and eventually contacted the Western Australian Museum to report what he had found. The museum sent a field officer to investigate the following year. What the field officer found was a series of stone alignments composed of rocks that had been deliberately set upright into the ground rather than simply placed on its surface. The longest of the alignments runs for approximately 340 meters in an almost perfectly straight line across open country with no obvious natural feature directing its course. The rocks used to form the alignments are not native to the immediate surrounding area. Petrographic analysis confirmed they are a variety of quartzite found naturally approximately 60 kilometers to the south. Moving these rocks to this location, setting them upright and in consistent sequence across 340 meters of open ground, and doing so with the degree of regularity visible in the alignment, would have required significant and sustained organized effort over a considerable period. The purpose of the alignments is entirely unknown. The field officer's report recommended further dedicated study of the site. That study has not been conducted. Number 6. The Mitchell Plateau Cave Network. The Mitchell Plateau, in the far northwest of the Kimberley, is celebrated for its waterfalls. The Mitchell Falls cascade in 4 stages through ancient layered sandstone before reaching the mangrove and tidal river country below, and the walking track to them is one of the most popular in the entire region. The plateau itself, however, is riddled with cave systems that almost nobody explores. In 2018, a pair of experienced cavers, working with permission from the relevant land council, discovered a section of one of these cave systems that showed clear evidence of extensive and deliberate human modification. The cave floor had been leveled, not simply worn smooth by centuries of foot traffic, but deliberately leveled with compacted fill material packed methodically into the lower sections to create a consistently flat walking surface extending for more than 80 meters into the hillside. The walls of this section of the cave had been widened in places, with tool marks still clearly visible on the exposed sandstone face where the widening work was carried out. At the deepest accessible point, the cavers found a chamber roughly 8 meters across with a natural circular skylight in the ceiling through which direct sunlight enters for a limited period each afternoon. Around the base of the walls of this chamber, there is a carved channel approximately 20 centimeters wide and 15 centimeters deep, running in a continuous unbroken loop around the entire perimeter of the space. This channel connects through a narrow, incised groove that runs the full length of the modified passage toward the cave entrance. Hydrologists, who later examined detailed photographs of the system, concluded this represented a sophisticated water collection and controlled channeling system of significant engineering complexity. When it was designed and built, and by whom, remains entirely unknown. Number 7. The Ord River Geometric Earthworks. The Ord River in the eastern Kimberley is associated today primarily with the Ord River Irrigation Scheme, one of the largest agricultural water infrastructure projects in Australian history. When Lake Argyle was created by the damming of the Ord River through the 1960s and 1970s, enormous areas of surrounding country were cleared, surveyed, and fundamentally altered. During the original survey work for that project, earthworks were identified on elevated ground overlooking what would become the lake's northern shore. These earthworks consist of low raised earth ridges forming geometric shapes across roughly 2 hectares of ground above the original river level. The shapes include long parallel ridges running for consistent distances, several precise right-angle intersections, and at least one clearly circular raised formation approximately 30 meters in diameter. The survey team at the time noted the earthworks in passing, but classified them without further investigation as likely remnants of old pastoral infrastructure from early European settlement of the region. In 2009, a historian researching the early pastoral industry of the Ord River country checked every available beneath historical record relating to properties that had ever operated in that specific area and found no evidence whatsoever that any pastoral infrastructure remotely resembling these formations had ever been built or documented there. A subsequent independent review by an archaeologist from Charles Darwin University noted that the construction technique visible in the earthworks, particularly the way the ridges had been built up from multiple deliberately selected layers of different soil types, was entirely inconsistent with any known colonial-era earth-moving practice in the Kimberley. The earthworks sit today at the edge of Lake Argyll, partially inundated for much of the year, slowly being claimed by the water. Number 8. The Dampier Peninsula sandstone carvings. The Dampier Peninsula extends north from Broome into the Indian Ocean, its red Pindon cliffs, dropping directly into the sea along much of the western coastline, and its eastern tidal flats, stretching out for extraordinary distances at low water. In the red sandstone cliff faces along a continuous 1-2 kilometre stretch of the western coast, there are carvings. Not the well-documented Bradshaw figures or Wandjina spirit images found further inland across the Kimberley. Something entirely different. These are deeply incised geometric forms cut into the cliff face itself. Spirals, grid patterns, and in one section of cliff, only visible from the water because the cliff face overhangs its own base, a series of what appear to be detailed astronomical diagrams. Circles with radiating lines nested within larger circles, some with smaller marked dots, positioned at specific and repeating intervals around their outer perimeters. Marine archaeologist Rebecca Cullen, working independently through 2020, documented 47 separate carved panels along this coastal stretch. She noted in her published account that many of the carvings are positioned at heights that would have corresponded to ground level when sea levels were significantly lower than they are today. Her conclusion was that the carvings were created when the coastline was positioned considerably further west, placing their creation conservatively at somewhere between 8,000 and 12,000 years before the present. The panels have not been formally studied by any government-funded research institution. Number 9. The Fitzroy Crossing subsurface stone grid. The town of Fitzroy Crossing sits at one of the few reliable crossing points on the Fitzroy River in the central Kimberley. The Fitzroy is a massive river system capable of flooding to a width of several kilometres during the wet season and dropping to isolated pools and dry sandy channels through the long dry months. During an extended drought in the early 2000s, sections of the riverbed that are normally either underwater or buried beneath wet season sediment deposits were exposed for an unusually prolonged period. A water resources officer conducting a routine hydrological survey of the low-flow channel in 2003 noticed, in one section of exposed riverbed near a wide sandy bend, a regular pattern of stones just visible beneath a thin layer of dried silt. He recorded the location carefully and took extensive photographs. When the sediment was carefully brushed from a test section, the pattern proved to be a grid of flat stones set into the old riverbed at consistent intervals, covering an area of approximately 400 square meters. The grid was not a random scatter. The spacing between individual stones remained consistent throughout the entire surveyed area. The stones themselves were all of a similar size, roughly 60 to 80 centimeters across, and had clearly been selected from a stone type not found naturally anywhere at that location on the river. The survey officer filed his full report and the photographs with the Western Australian Department of Water. The file remains accessible. The grid has never been formally excavated or assessed by archaeologists. Number 10. The Cockburn Range underground passages. The Cockburn Range runs along the southern edge of the Gibb River floodplain, near the Northern Territory border in the far east of the Kimberley region. It is one of the most visually dramatic escarpments in the entire northwest, a sheer red sandstone wall rising 300 meters above the surrounding tropical savanna, with almost no gradual transition, just rock and then plain. What is less widely known, even among people who work and travel in this region regularly, is that the base of this escarpment, in at least 6 documented locations, contains passages. Not simple caves or rock shelters of the kind found across the whole of the Kimberley. Passages. Defined entry points with clear thresholds, passageways that run horizontally into the sandstone body of the range for distances of up to 120 meters before opening into interior spaces, and in 2 documented cases, passages that connect completely through to secondary openings on the opposite face of the escarpment. The passages were first formally noted by a geological survey team working the area in 1987. The survey report of that year described the passages as possibly natural formations, produced by differential erosion of softer rock layers within the sandstone sequence over geological time. A second and more detailed geological review, conducted in 2013, challenged that conclusion directly. The 2013 review noted that the interior walls of the passages showed clear evidence of deliberate working. The angles at interior corners were too geometrically consistent to be the product of natural differential erosion. The floor levels across the full length of the passages were too even and continuous to be accounted for by any geological process known to operate in this type of sandstone formation. And in one passage, a section of the side wall had been carefully filled with a dry stone construction to close off what would otherwise have been an opening into an unwanted secondary cavity. Someone made a deliberate architectural decision about the layout of that passage and had both the materials and the technical skill to execute it cleanly. The passages remain open today. They appear on no publicly available map of the region. The Kimberley region of Western Australia contains more than 420,000 square kilometres of ancient country. Much of it has never been subject to systematic archaeological investigation. The 10 sites described in this video represent only those discoveries that have been documented, photographed, and reported through some traceable and verifiable chain of evidence. What these 10 sites suggest, taken together, is that the people of the ancient Kimberley were not simply surviving in a challenging environment across those tens of thousands of years. They were building in it, modifying it with clear intent and demonstrable technical skill, creating water systems, stone records, and underground spaces that served purposes we can only begin to guess at today. The question of what they were building and what knowledge drove that choice across those extraordinary spans of time is one Australian archaeology has barely begun asking. Subscribe and stay with us. There is much more of this country left to uncover.